Okay, what's going on there, everybody? My name is Mang. Welcome back to Mangging. Unfortunately, well, depending, we were not able to play Shadowrun today because Ziggy was preoccupied with something else. And so I had the bright idea to try out another role-playing game by the name of Call of Cthulhu. And so Call of Cthulhu has been around for many, many years, a couple decades at least. And they're working on a 7th edition, a new edition, and this is really the first one that has some kind of major change in how the game plays. And so they did a Kickstarter. It raised like 500 grand over their goal. Big success. And they're apparently planning on a late spring release, which I will definitely buy. I did not get in on the Kickstarter because I guess I didn't know about it. But I will be purchasing the actual books once they come out. But as for right now, all they have is the Quick Start rules, which is fine. You can run things with the Quick Start rules. Not, you know, obviously it's no comparison for the full book, but we can handle things. And so I had the Quick Start rules, and I wasn't planning on doing anything Call of Cthulhu until the actual book came out. But since we had this little break here this day where we weren't doing anything, and I've been reading up on it, I was like, it'd be kind of fun. I think it'd be kind of cool. So I recruited some members, Ren, of course, Edward, of course, and we also grabbed Olaf to try it out. It's his first ever pen and paper experience. Exciting stuff. Okay, and so we started that. Now, anybody that has been following my channel for a while here probably has found out that I'm kind of into all the Lovecraft stuff. I'm a big fan. Yeah, I read plenty of Lovecraftian books. I watched the Dunwich Horror. God help me. And I recently finished an LP of the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth game. And so a Call of Cthulhu, a Lovecraft pen and paper game, seems right up my alley. And after today's session, where I had like the most fun I've had in a pen and paper game in a long time, DMing, I can confirm it's very up my alley. So, hijinks ensued. Okay, so Call of Cthulhu pen and paper RPG. What is it about? Well, it's very different from something like D&D. You know, D&D, you're heroes. You're born for this specific purpose. You're different from everybody else because you can kick ass and take names. And so you go out there and you kick ass and take names. And you're rescuing princesses and you're slaying dragons and you're killing liches and you're doing all sorts of awesome stuff. Generally, obviously, you know, D&D games can do whatever, but that's the general concept. Call of Cthulhu, you're playing as professors, archaeologists, teachers, private investigators, actresses. You know, basically, the cool part is playing anything other than just, I mean, you can play as like a soldier or something, but that's kind of boring. A soldier is not a Lovecraft hero, okay? A Lovecraft hero is the 70-year-old Professor Armitage, okay? That, you know, uses his wits, you know, and his willpower to conquer things, occasionally. And so, you know, you're playing these guys that are not meant to be kicking ass and taking names. You're investigators. That's what you're called. You're not, you know, you're not characters. You're investigators. And so you go and you're finding clues, and you're going to libraries and looking up information, and you know you're following this trail of just cosmic evil and lurking horrors, just constantly on edge, never knowing what's around the corner in the shadows, and then you die usually or go insane. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu is pretty well known as kind of a meat grinder game, where you don't tend to really get attached to characters too much. You know, if your character survives all the way over the course of a campaign, holy shit, man. You either, you know, You're either incredibly lucky or incredibly good. I don't know. Probably both. So yeah, it's a meat grinder, and that's why it's fun, because people go in knowing they're playing Call of Cthulhu generally, and so you know that there's gonna be evil shit. You're gonna likely die very easily. You're gonna likely go insane very easily, and that's the fun of it for both the players and the DM, the keeper. Okay, so we sat down and we started making our character. They started making their characters. And so it's actually really easy. I mean, the first time it took a little while because I had to walk them through it. But after that, you can make a character in a few minutes, easily. Basically, you pick an occupation. And this can be anything. There's not like a class or anything listed in the book. This is just your job. So, like I said, professor, archaeologist, psychiatrist, taxi driver, actress, prostitute, whatever you want. It's your job. Now, some lend more common in games than others. The professors and the private investigators, the cops, things like that are more common than being an actress or trying to think of a job. The teenager that works at McDonald's or whatever, But whatever you want, whatever occupation you want, and then you pick out your characteristics, strength, dex, appearance, intelligence, education, constitution, size, all stuff like that. You fill out those. And in the older editions, well, I've read parts of 6th edition to kind of get to know how that was like compared to this one. And again, I only have the quick start rules for 7th edition, so I imagine the book is going to be slightly different. But for 6th edition, you roll your stats. So you roll like 3d6, and you assign your stats. Okay? In 7th edition, in the quick start, you just get an array. And so you assign these preordained numbers to your shit. So you don't roll, so everybody's kind of balanced, In, earlier editions when you're rolling, you can get like a 3 for your strength, or a 4 strength, and you're like, alright, my professor is, geriatric, he's not very strong. So you can kind of get funny situations like that. I think that's funner, in a way, because you can have these non-balanced characters. Which is, it's kind of the curse of 4th edition, really. D&D is everything. You're always balanced, pretty much. It's very hard to make an unbalanced 4th edition D&D character. And so the rolling for stats, just that excitement and that tension when you're rolling for shit, that's pretty cool. And I could probably come up with a rule for that for 7th edition. But the difference is in 6th edition and earlier, your stats would be like 12, 15, 8, stuff like a 3d6 roll. And then for 7th edition in the quick start rules, and probably, overall, it's going to be stuff like 70, 60, 45, stuff like that. And so they kind of did this across the board to make it easier to understand. Because how Call of Cthulhu works, how skill checks work, whatever, is you roll a D100. Which is nice playing online, because you just type D100, you don't actually have to roll, well, 2D10s, whatever. Anyways. Yeah, it's going to be one of those kind of episodes. So you roll a D100, and then you look at your skill. Say you're trying to do a climb skill, and you have 50 into it. So you have a 50 climb skill. Say you roll your D100 and you get 43. That means you succeeded. So if you roll at the number or under it, you succeed. If you roll over it, you fail. Which is, it's kind of strange. You want to roll low, but you want high skills, So, you want a high skill, sure, but a 1 is a crit, and a 100 is a critical fail, So they did this across the board for your skills and your characteristics that, it's just, 40, 70, 25, whatever, Unlike earlier editions, where if they were asking for like a characteristic check, like a strength check, they would have it be like, okay, the goal or whatever is roll like a strength times 5, and if you roll under it, you succeed. You know, so here it's just across the board. Now, in earlier editions, they could make a task more difficult or easier by changing the multiplier you need to do. So a strength times 2 would be a lot harder than a strength times 6. Okay, I hope you're following me. If not, it doesn't. We'll get to the hijinks soon enough. And so in 7th edition, they changed it so, okay, here's just a flat number. You know, this is always what you're rolling, but if you want to make it a hard task or a really hard task, you either have to roll half this number or 1/5 of this number. So it's kind of similar, they just made it easier for people to understand, I think. Less math, perhaps. And so, say your strength is 50. You want to do a normal task, you have to roll under 50. You want to do a hard task, you have to roll under 25. If you want to do an extreme thing, you know, the limits of human possibilities, you'd have to roll under 10. And so it's not like, you know, it's not like if you have a strength of 40 and I have a strength of 80, we can't accomplish the same thing. It's just, it's going to be much easier for me pretty much all the time than it is for you, because I can much easier roll an extreme success than you can. So I like this system, but I have really no standard for comparison. You know, I've never played any of the earlier editions. But, you know, it seemed to work fine for what we did. Okay, so characteristics, that's all done. That's easy. You know, you determine your current sanity, which is based off one of your characteristics. And so you can, at least in the quick start, you can either start with like an 80 sanity out of 99 max, which is very good. 80 sanity is... that's where you want to be at. You can start with a 40 sanity, which is not great. So I think Edward started with like 50 sanity, so... okay. You determine magic points, which we didn't... there's not really any magic going on in this little quick session. We will be getting to magic later, though. In another session, I'm sure. HP. HP in the quick start rules can be anywhere from 9 to 15 based on some of your characteristics. So the low end is 9 health, the high end is 15 health, which is not a huge gap, but it does make a big difference, believe me. And then finally is the luck score. And this is a concept I really like, because some characters can be luckier than others. And so this is basically their version of the fate dice that we've mentioned so many times in the past. And in every other time we've done it, it's always just been, well, roll a d20. And, you know, if you roll high on the d20, okay, something good happens. Good fate happens. If you roll low, oh, something bad happens. And, you know, that was always fun. It was always a very tense moment when you're rolling a fate dice. But now they have this thing where each character has differing, you know, fate chances. And so how this works for the quick start is you roll 3d6 and you multiply by 5. So kind of a callback to the other thing. So the average is going to be, you know, 45-ish, I think, roughly. So that is your luck score. So when the DM says, okay, roll luck, you have to roll 45 or under to get a good thing. And so you would use this, you can use this a lot more than you would use a fate dice, you know, depending. A few times it popped up during the session was like they were looking in like a burned out chapel for like a candle or something to light. This is exactly where you use a luck. And so if the whole group is doing it, you just use the person with the lowest luck, you know, to really screw them. Everything is always trying to screw the players, obviously. And so if they roll their luck check, maybe they find a candle, maybe they find a lantern, whatever. But if they fail, too bad. You know, that's, boom, fate dice. And so the group is hindered by the guy with the low luck score, but it's random. You know, you just roll the 3d6. You could get 15 luck. And so that's good. Random dice rolls at character creation that can screw you. I love it. Alright, so then you move on to skills. And first are occupational skills. And these are just 8 skills. They have a list of all the skills on the character sheet. And these are just 8 skills that you believe when you're making your character, your occupation would require you to be good at. So, you know, a professor would obviously be very good at whatever he's a professor of, you know, literature, mathematics, whatever it is. A private detective would be good at, you know, spotting hidden stuff, persuade, disguise maybe, perhaps firearms. An actress would be good at acting. You know, you can understand where it goes from there. And you can write in custom skills if you want. If it's not listed, you can write it in and put your points into it. And then after you do all that, you also have to assign one of the pre-assigned scores to credit rating. And so this is how wealthy you are. And unfortunately, here's the thing, and Ren brought it up because he was playing a wealthy actress. And so having a credit rating of like 99 means you're the richest of the rich. But having it in the 90s, you know, you're pretty damn wealthy. You're a celebrity, something like that. But the pre-assigned scores in the quick start rules that you can only apply, you know, you have to assign one of these numbers to it. It only goes up to 70, I think. And having a 70 credit rating is good, absolutely, but I don't think it really fit him being a wealthy actress. So he was more like a local theater actress, I guess. So I don't know if that will change in the real book. Probably. Otherwise, I don't know how you would ever get to 99 credit rating. If it's possible. And so then you move on to personal interest skills. And so these are stuff that you know, they say it's like, well, you just took a personal interest in, you use as a hobby to get better at, or whatever. But really, that doesn't make sense for shit like dodge or spot hidden. You're not trained, you're not like, as a hobby, you're spotting hidden stuff. Like what, you're looking at Where's Waldo books? I don't know. But this is pretty much stuff that you just want to be slightly better at as a character. And so this stuff you just, like, each skill has a little number in parentheses next to it that is just your innate ability. And so these you just add 20% to, and you get 4 of them. And so since each skill has an innate score to it, even if you're untrained in it, you can still try. Because anybody can get like a lucky guess or just whatever. So, you know, archaeology, everybody has an innate 1% chance to succeed in it. So you ask some random taxi driver, what do you think of this archaeological piece? He rolls a 1, he rolls a crit. Oh, well, this, I can tell you about this thing. I don't know how it works, that's just funny. Because crits are very, you know, 1% chance. So, yeah. Okay, so after all the skills are done, you write down your equipment, your, you know, the gear you're carrying, any items, whatever you carry around with you, and your weapons. And the interesting thing about this is, at least in the quick start rules, there might be rules in the full book, but I was, you know, skimming through the 6th edition. I saw prices, but I didn't really see, I don't know. I don't know how they did it. Maybe I should have read it more extensively, but, you know, it's just kind of random stuff. Like, you know, Call of Cthulhu doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty. It's not a crunch game, you know? It's just like, okay, you know, if you want to be carrying this stuff in your purse or whatever, go ahead. Things like guns. Guns are a very interesting part. Because everybody wants a gun. You know, you're going up against scary shit. Guns exist. Who doesn't want a gun? And so the interesting thing as a keeper is, okay, you tell the players, like, if you can rationalize, you know, if you can really reason with me why your character would have a gun, I might allow it. And so they come up with this elaborate thing or whatever, you know. And for whatever weaponry they have, a sword cane, God knows what. And so you say that to them, but in your mind you're like, it doesn't mean jack shit. You know, they go up against a Shoggoth, they can fire their guns all day at it, it's still going to rip them apart. So, yeah, that's just a funny little dilemma where the players are always going to, you know, try and get, well, I've got a gun in my glove box, or, you know, I got a Derringer in my pocket, whatever, you know. No big deal. I use it for self-defense, like, good luck with that. Okay, so after all that's over, that's pretty much character creation. It's not very crunchy. Alright, and so we had Ren playing the actress, who had an interest in the occult. We had Olaf playing a private investigator. And we had Edward playing like an engineer who also had an interest in the occult. And so we went through the very basic, quick scenario that's been included in every Call of Cthulhu edition, called The Haunting or A Haunting. I'll have to check. One of those two. Haunting. And so if anybody that's played Call of Cthulhu has probably played this scenario. Most likely. This is the introduction one. This or Edge of Darkness, which we'll probably be playing next time. Okay, and so in this one, the players are tasked by a landlord to investigate this house that's supposedly haunted. He's having a lot of trouble, renting it out or whatever. And so weird things have happened there. Tragedy has happened there. And so the players are going to go in and see what's going on in there. Bad things are going on in there. Okay. And so they made the characters, and they started out at Olaf's office, his private investigator offices. And the landlord gave them the keys, the address, and $25 in advance pay, with like $100 after they finish, once they solve the mystery. And off they go. I just let them go. The introductory paragraph does mention you could do your research at the library, at the Hall of Records, or at the Boston Globe. And so this scenario is designed to kind of lead these people that are completely new to Call of Cthulhu. That you're not meant to just rush to the scene of action and kick in the door and that you're playing investigators. You're playing these kind of characters that do their research. And so obviously all the fun stories you're going to hear about Call of Cthulhu happen during the action section, or during like the planning section or whatever it is. When weird stuff starts happening. Not too many funny stories happen during the research part. And definitely not in the haunting scenario. And so they go to the library, they basically go to every single spot available to them for research that's in the scenario. I was kind of impressed that they went to every spot. So the boring stuff is they went to the library, they went to the Boston Globe, they went to the Hall of Records, they went to the police station, and so they got all the basic facts. And the basic facts are this guy, Walter Corbett, moved into this house. His neighbors complained about all this weird activity, but he won the lawsuit against him. And there was a lawsuit, or there was something about a lawsuit as part of his will that he wanted to be buried in the basement. But they couldn't find, any more information about that lawsuit. And they found out that his will was carried out by a Reverend Michael Thomas, who belonged to this kind of weird church. Didn't quite sound like a Christian church or anything like that. And so eventually they went to the church, which was raided by the police a few years back and burned to the ground. And people died. It was this big tragedy. And so they went to this church. And it was just mostly rubble. There was a lot of rubble involved in it. And there was like a symbol painted on the wall. And Edward rolled his occult thing, and he succeeded on this symbol. And so I told him, like, you have a vague recollection that this symbol is related to a small cult devoted to an entity that they called the Opener of the Way. And I just made this bullshit up. Partly. And so they continued exploring. Edward kind of just sat there and stared at this symbol. The other two were walking around, and the floorboard suddenly just collapsed in. And they both made their luck checks. This would be another situation. Actually, if it were up to me, and I would probably go back and change this, I probably wouldn't have had them roll a luck. I would have just had them roll their jumps. Like, you were caught in it, jump out, But the scenario said, make them roll their luck checks. I think this is just to kind of ease people into it, but c'est la vie. I would have just said, roll your jump, you fail, you're falling. But both of them made their luck check, so they got out of the way as the floorboards collapsed. And so they look down into this hole. It's like a 10-foot drop into what appears to be a basement. So they're looking down there. They don't have flashlights or anything like that. They just have the sunlight streaming in. And so Olaf's like, all right, well, I'm going to climb down there because, you know, it's another room down there, which it is. There's stuff down there. And so he rolls his climb, which he is unskilled in. He did not put any points into climb, which is bad because the innate climb skill is pretty damn low. I think it's like 20. So you have a 1 in 5% chance, or 1 in 5 chance of succeeding in a climb check if you're unskilled in it. Let alone getting like a hard success. And so he failed. And he fell. And he took some damage. Not much, but a little bit. And so now he's down there. It's in this kind of dusty, you know, closed off basement. He finds a couple skeletons wearing some weird, like, cultist robes. And that's, you know, spooky. And so he searches down there, and he eventually finds, like a journal. Like a journal and a big book. And so he takes these, he hands them up to Edward, who is the occult guy. And Edward apparently can read Latin, because during character creation, he was like, well, what skill should I take, you know? And I'm like, I listed off, you know, the useful stuff. Spot hidden, which you use a lot. Listen. Psychoanalysis is kind of useful if you're, you know, talking to somebody else, you want to find out if they're lying. Firearms is, you know, occasionally useful. Stuff like that. Brawl is useful. And I said, knowing how to read Latin is very useful. And it is. Reading Latin is one of the most useful skills in the game, I would say. Potentially. It can also be like the worst skill in the game, and you'll understand why in a little bit. But I say the most useful is probably library use. Library use is very good. You can, pretty much any scenario, you can go to the library and do your research. And you know, if you're good at it, you can get a lot of info out of that that'll help you. Okay, and so, okay, so Edward's got this journal and this book. He goes through the journal, and all he finds out in the journal, which is very, you know, frayed and musty and moldy and whatever, is that it confirms that Walter Corbett was buried in the basement of his home. For his wishes and for the wishes of that which waits in the dark, or some shit like that. Some cultist stuff like that. Okay, that's pretty much all it said. And then the book, he rolled his read Latin and he succeeded. And the book was a copy of the Liber Ivanus, which is the Latin translation of the Book of Ibon, which is a, you know, pretty classic book in the Cthulhu mythos, and you know, a standard cult book. And so he takes an interest in this. You know, this is real heavy occult shit. And so he takes an interest in this. He wants to read it. It's going to take him a few hours to read it. And he is starting to read that, while the other two go. Okay, they go to the neighborhood, and they meet with a guy named Mr. Dooley. And he tells them about the house, and how the Macarios used to live there, and the guy, you know, the father ran out the house covered in blood, screaming, and blah, 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 and it was a tragedy, and now they're down at the sanitarium, and blah, blah, blah. So they go pay a visit to the sanitarium. They want to talk to this guy. Get any information they can. Like I said, they covered all their grounds. This was pretty much everything the scenario supplied as far as, you know, places they could research. So they go to the sanitarium. The father, Vittorio Macari, is just he's kind of almost catatonic. He just kind of leans back and forth, and he whispers, "The eyes, the eyes, the eyes," over and over and over. And then when they try to speak with him, he like flipped open his Bible, he pointed to a section, and he's like, by his own weapon be the devil worsted, or some shit. Which is a clue. It is a clue, which I'll mention later. Players might pick up on it, they might not. The scenario says, do not make a big point of this. Just, mention it, and then if they pick up on it, great. If not, whatever. And so they didn't get much out of him. Then they went to talk to the woman who gave her story about how things just got worse and worse in the house until one night, Vittorio was just standing over her with a knife, but then he stabbed himself and ran out of the house, and so they got out of Dodge there. Not a tremendous amount of information for them to go off of. I think there are going to be scenarios where doing the research is like essential, where they need to know stuff, but I think if you run this scenario and the players just go straight to the house, it wouldn't. I was gonna say it wouldn't kill them. That's funny. But it wouldn't be. There's nothing really essential that you learn from the research. You learn that Walter is probably buried in the basement. He was involved in some real occult shit, and he drove the other people insane. And so from that, you could probably glean that bad things in the house are happening because of Walter, who's buried in the basement. If you really do all your research and you come to that conclusion, then that would be it. But maybe that helps you, maybe it doesn't. You're still going to be in the house. Bad things are still going to happen to you. Okay, so they did all that, and Edward read the whole thing. He read the Book of Eibon. And he gained some points in the Cthulhu Mythos skill. And the Cthulhu Mythos skill is unique because no investigator can start with points in it. Every investigator is completely ignorant to the Mythos threat, as they say. And so you can't start with it. You have to just expose yourself to the Mythos to gain points into it. And as many points as you have into the Cthulhu Mythos skill is the number that your maximum sanity is reduced. So if you have 2 points in the Mythos skill, your maximum sanity would be 97 instead of 99. Which doesn't matter for a while. If your Cthulhu Mythos skill is under like 20, it's probably not going to make a big difference. Assuming these characters even survive that long. If you're running a long campaign and you're trying to survive, then yeah, it probably matters. A lot of shit can drain your sanity, but you can get sanity back. You can get sanity back in a couple different ways. I guess a few different ways. One is defeating Mythos threats. So actually accomplishing an objective and triumphing over this cosmic shit. That will give you some sanity back. The other is like therapy. Electroshock therapy, perhaps. That can give you sanity points back. Just going to a psychiatrist and all that kind of stuff. That can give it back. And then, medication. Just drown out the memories, the bad memories. That might give you some sanity back. It's not likely to happen because you're likely to be dead anyways. But there you go. Okay, where was I? Alright, so he did that, he got the skills, and he found out a spell. And this is not in the thing. They don't describe pretty much almost any magic in the quick start rules. For a good reason. But I wanted something cool in there just in case. And so for the 6th edition, under the Book of Eibon, it mentions a bunch of spells that could be learned from it. And so I picked one. And I kind of just transferred it over to 7th edition, which was not that difficult. And so I picked the Deflect Harm spell. And so he learned it. And so what it does is you speak this incantation, you hold your hand up, and you focus on a target. And then you put your hand back down again, and I guess as long as you're continuing the incantation, you cannot be harmed by this guy, whoever the target is. And I thought that would have been really cool if in the end he's using this spell and he actually defeats Walter Corbett because of that. That would be really badass. So I just put it in there as a cool option, like, you just learn a spell, you know. Now, casting spells costs you sanity, of course, but oh well. Okay, so he got all that, and they exhausted all their research, and so they're finally ready to go into the house. This is where the fun stuff comes. Okay. So this house is like, it's in this neighborhood, and pretty much every other residence in the neighborhood has been replaced with office buildings and things like that. This is the only private residence left. And it's just kind of, it's just worn down, weathered, overgrown yard. It just looks like shit. It looks like a haunted house, okay? And so they're wary, of course they are, of the, you know, they've heard some bad shit so far. So they're wary, but they go in, they open the front door, and they're faced with like a hallway with rooms on either side. And so Ren's like, okay, we should just go through as a group and we'll check these rooms one by one. And I'm like, no, you gotta split up. You think about how much more room you can cover. He's like, nope. So, yeah, that would have been much more fun. Okay, so they go through the first room. It's just like a storage closet, but there is a cupboard there. It's a boarded up cupboard. And so the two men try and get this board off with a wrench. They try bashing it off. They can't. So the little actress comes up and she knocks it clean off because dice rolls. And so inside they find 3 big bound books. And based on the titles, these are the personal diaries of a Mr. W. Corbin. And so there's some info packed in here. And so Edward grabs those to read later. You know, it's going to take like 2 days for one person to read those. And so he grabs those, and he's ready to leave at that point. He's like, well, we should get out of here. We'll read these, and then we'll come back. And the other two are like, well, we're in the house already, so we should just keep exploring. And explore they do. Okay. So, oh, right. Olaf goes to open the cupboard. And as soon as he places his hands on the handle, I have them all roll a listen check. And Olaf and Edward succeeded. And I'm like, as soon as you place your hand on it, you hear a loud thump noise upstairs. And he's like, he takes his hands off. He's like, ah! And so they pause for a moment, and then Edward's just like, and he opens it up. Okay. So they heard a noise up there. Right now they think it's a hobo. Okay, a squatter. Okay. They go into the next room. It's like the living room. It's got like a couch, a radio, just a bunch of knickknacks, and then all sorts of crosses and like Virgin Mary pictures, all sorts of Christian iconography and all that stuff. And so, oh man. Okay, Olaf starts searching the room. He does his spot hidden roll, and there's nothing in this room. But I let him roll. You gotta let him roll, of course. And so while he's searching, I'm like, okay. You know, you're like looking under the couch, you're looking all over the place, and suddenly you hear a soft thump noise behind you. And so he like whips around. And I'm like, you see one of the crosses that was hanging on the wall is now on the floor. And so, you know, Call of Cthulhu, I don't think it'll ever be, you know, of course it won't ever be as scary playing a game as it would be in real life. You know, if this were real life, this house would freak you the F out, man. But okay, so he sees the cross is just falling off. He goes and picks it up. And I of course, you know, I'm making all this shit up, this weird stuff. And I'm like, okay, I gotta take it a step further. So I'm like, he's like, all right, I look over the cross to see if anything's weird. I'm like, all right, as you turn it over in your hand, you notice that your palm is suddenly like red. And he's like, okay, I smell it. I smell my hand. And I'm like, it smells like blood. And he's like, okay, I look over the cross. Is there any blood on it? And I'm like, no, there isn't. And so he shows his hand to the other guys. And Edward says, I go and lick his palm. Okay, I can't stop you from doing that. Olaf could, but he didn't. And so he licked his palm, and I'm like, well, it tastes like, Olaf's palm. It doesn't taste like blood. And so Olaf's like, I do like a backhand motion to him. And I'm like, okay, after you do the backhand motion, you look back at your hand and you notice that it's unblemished. And he's like, oh, that lick was really strong. Okay, and so he puts the cross back on the wall, and I think Edward goes into the corner and vomits. I don't know why. He thought he was poisoned or something. So I made him roll a constitution to see if he could make himself throw up, and he succeeded, so okay. So he throws up in the corner. They go into the next room, which is the dining room. They look around, they don't see anything, so they go into the next room, which is the kitchen. And they look around, and most of the food is just rotten or been eaten by rats or shit like that. Edward finds a can of beans, and he starts holding onto it. He doesn't eat it yet, he just holds onto a cold can of beans in a spoon. And so it's at this point it's at this point that I do another listen check. Olaf succeeds. And so I tell him, you hear a scratching noise underneath the floor. And so he gets down on his hands and knees and he listens, and I'm like, it gets louder. And he's like, guys, do you hear this? And so they get down and they're trying to listen. And they're like, do we hear anything? No, you don't. And so Olaf's like, guys, you don't hear this? And I'm like, the scratching's really loud. And the other two can't hear it for whatever reason. For whatever reason. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And so then I think Edward gets kind of spooked. So he backs up into the corner. He's like, I keep my eyes on both sets of doors, and I'm back in the corner. And I'm like, okay. And they think something's coming. And so Ren's like, I'm looking around for anything sharp. And so I have them all three roll spot hidden. Spot hidden. Perception, basically. They all fail. And so I was going to have something happen. But I think it's much funner for them to fail their spot hiddens and then me not say anything about it. I think that's a lot cooler. So they have no idea. It doesn't matter what I was going to do. And so all Ren finds is a butter knife, because he failed his luck check again. So he finds a butter knife. And so he's clutching that. Edwards is in the corner with his can of beans. And Olaf is still on the floor listening. And so nothing happens. And so they're like, okay, let's just move on. So they go back out into the hallway. And they check out the other two rooms. They check out one room, which is another storage room filled with old broken furniture. And then the other room is the mud room. And so there's, galoshes, umbrellas, boots, hats, all that kind of stuff. And there's a door leading outside. And so it's at this point that I really started to have fun. Because it was at this point, so far, I had just been saying this stuff out loud. Olaf, you hear scratching. And so the others heard me say, you hear scratching, but their characters didn't hear scratching. You understand? I'm just saying this out loud. But it was at this point I did something a little sneaky. We were using Roll20, of course, and on Roll20 you can whisper to an individual person, and only they see the message. And I knew I was going to have some fun with this. So I whisper to... I whispered to somebody. It might have been... Ren. Yeah, I think I whispered to Ren at some point that he heard rattling upstairs. And he saw like a blood trail leading upstairs. I whispered to Olaf. Yeah, I whispered to Olaf. I was like, you hear a whisper in your head. It says, one of your friends cannot be trusted. And then I whispered to Edward, and I said, you hear a whisper in your head. It says, shoot the other two. Because I think he had his gun out, or something like that. And so, it was funny, like, listening over Skype. After I would whisper them, there would be like this moment of silence from them where they wouldn't say anything, where they're just like reading this and like, like, what do I do? You know, because they don't want to say this out loud. Like, hey guys, I just heard a whisper in my head. It's that psychotic. Okay, so at this point, Olaf and Edward were both still in the mudroom, and Ren had stepped out of the mudroom to go set up like an umbrella near the front door. For some purpose of, you know, seeing if anybody is going to come in to the house or whatever like that. And so later on, after the session, Edward was like, yeah, when I had got that whisper in my head, if both Olaf and Ren had been in the same room, I would have shot them both. And I'm like, what? That's all it would take? Is you hear one whisper in your head and just bang, bang! Okay, I guess he's kind of unstable, but I really wish that would have happened. That would have been an amazing ending. Okay. So they all got this, and they all just kept this to themselves. But after all that, they all left the house. They all decided, let's just leave the house. Like, Ren didn't even follow up on the rattling or the blood trail. I don't really blame him. That's pretty effed up. Yeah, you know, okay. And so they're all standing outside of the front of the house. And they start a conversation with each other. And this conversation, I've never laughed harder in my life, man. I muted my microphone for like 10 minutes while I was just laughing my ass off. And like, my brother walked nearby and I had to call him over. And I showed him like the stuff that I had messaged the other guys, and I had explained what I was doing, and after I had explained all that, we hear over Skype, I think it was like Ren, he's like, it doesn't matter how much we get paid if we're dead, and I'm just like, oh my god, and he starts busting up. God, it was so funny, them just going back and forth, like, trying to hide the fact that they heard anything, you know? Edward's like, well, you know, we all heard something in that house. And so, at one point, Edward dropped the quote. He's like, all I've heard is you guys. Or he said something like that, but it sounded even more suspicious. And so they both rolled their psychoanalysis on him. And I think Ren succeeded, I believe. And so I'm like, yeah, you can tell that he's hiding. Something happened to him in the house that he's hiding. And so Ren's like, I think you're holding out on us, Edward. I think something happened to you. And so just these few little messages in this house. Like, nothing even happened. But, oh my god, it was just the funniest thing ever. And I was like, from that moment, while I was in just fits of laughter, I was like, I freaking love this game. Okay. Alright. I had my laughter before. I'm good. Okay. So they all decide that, you know, they've had, like, enough of this house for one day. So they're going to go back home, and they're going to, like, read through... Oh, I think Edward decided he was going to read through the diaries himself. And I'm like, it's going to take a couple days. And he's like, that's fine. And so I'm like, okay, and you other two are just fine, you know, waiting a couple days? And they're like, yeah. So, like I said, they were really kind of spooked about this house. So any advantage they could get from reading these diaries, they were going to take. And so Edward went back and he read through these diaries. Now, the quick start rules mention almost nothing about what's in these diaries. It just says it describes his experiments with the occult and stuff. And I guess that's up to me to come up with shit, but I guess I was kind of lazy there. It's just this quick little scenario, whatever. You can find, I think, some places online where they go into much greater detail about what some creative people have come up with for what's in his diaries. I probably should have used that for reference, but like I said, it didn't really matter. So I was like, okay, it describes his experiments with the occult, blah, blah, blah. And after he got done, it was like, it described a very specific ritual entitled The Summoning of the Opener of the Ways, or something like that. And so this is an actual spell you could learn. But it would take him a couple weeks to learn it. And in the actual rules for the thing, it was like, this spell takes 2d6 weeks to learn, so it's not likely to be used. I kind of wanted them to use it, you know, because I thought it would be hilarious. So I gave it the minimum, and I was like, it takes 2 weeks. So hoping that that might bait Edward into doing it. It didn't in the end. Because they rationalized that Walter Corbett cast this ritual. He summoned the Opener of the Ways, and that's what haunting this house. And so Edward was like, well, I could... he was like, is there a spell in here to, like, banish this? And I was like, well, it's pretty much the same spell, but in reverse. You know, whatever. That's usually how it goes, isn't it? And so it would be the same spell. You'd have to learn the same thing. And so I thought he was really going to go for it there, but he offered it to the others is like, well, no, okay, hold on. So he reads about this spell. He gains more Cthulhu mythos. He loses more max sanity, and he loses like 4 current sanity. And then he like tears the pages out of the diaries about this spell, and he like puts it in like his coat pocket or something. And he calls up Ren, because he was supposed to call him up and report to him about the diaries. He's like, well, I read all the diaries, but, you know, I think there's something missing. And Ren's like, well, what would be missing? He's like, I don't know, it just seems like there's some pages missing. And he also called up Olaf to tell him the same thing. And Olaf rolled his psychoanalysis over the phone. And so he succeeded. It was like he rolled like an 8 or something like that. He barely succeeded, but okay. And so I'm like, all right, Olaf, your character rationalizes that it would be unlikely that some diaries that were boarded up in the cupboard would actually have anything missing. You know, who would actually bother to take pages out? It's much more likely that this Edward character that you don't really trust already would be hiding something from you. And so he's like, okay. I don't think he ever did anything with it. I think he just trusted him much less from then on. And so, alright, they're like, okay, I guess we just gotta go back to the house. I think they mentioned one point burning it down, but they decided that wasn't a great idea because they wouldn't get paid, and the cops would be after them, and there's no guarantee that would solve the problem. So, they go back to the house. And they had turned on the fuse box at one point. It was turned off. They flipped it back on. And the plan was... The plan was for me, I wanted them to turn it on. Because that meant that I could turn it off at the most opportune moment. So I actually wanted them to turn it on. So they turned it on. All the lights in the house were on. And they were like, alright, let's quit screwing around. We know he's buried in the basement. That's probably where he summoned this thing. Let's just get down there. And so they all had their guns out, or what? No, actually, I don't think they had their... I think Olaf was the only one that had his gun out. I'm not sure why Edward didn't have his gun out. And so I wanted them to go upstairs. Of course I did. That's where something fun happened. But they were dead set. I had the rattling happen, but they weren't buying it at this point. So they go downstairs, and they get down into the basement. And this is just a room just covered in trash. You know, all sorts of just kind of dangerous trash. There's nails, there's lumber, there's tools, there's garbage can lids, there's all sorts of stuff. And so Olaf, he wants to poke around. He wants to look for, like, books. And so he rolls his spot hidden, and he succeeds. And so I'm like, well, you don't find any books. But in one of the corners, you do find a knife. And it looks like some ornate, ancient knife. And there's like some oddly thick rust on it. He's like, oh, all right. I go to pick it up. I'm like, great. Roll your dodge. Okay, this knife is linked to Walter Corbett. This was something he used for a ritual or something like that. He imbued it with his magic. And so, Walter Corbett is in the basement. I will spoil that for you. He is in the basement of this house, but he is still alive. He's like kept in undeath or something by powerful magic. And so, he's obviously, you know, fucking with them. He's been doing all these whispers and all that kind of shit. And he also has the power to control this knife. And he can use it with deadly skill, man. So, this knife, his attacks for the knife are based off of his power score, which is 90. So, he's damn good with this knife. It's very dangerous. And so, Olaf manages to barely dodge the thing that came right at him. Like, he was like, you know? So, okay, he dodged that, but now this knife is just floating in the air. And so, seeing this, they all had to roll sanity checks. And so this is where you roll against your current sanity. If you roll less or equal, you succeed. And if you roll over, you fail. And so, failing usually gives a pretty rough sanity, you know, cost. 1d4, 1d8, 1d10, 1d100 for seeing Mighty Cthulhu or something. And so, a couple of them failed, but the problem was, it was a 1d4, which is kind of a boring one, because 5 is the magic number. If you lose 5 points of sanity, at least 5 in one go, with one check, you go temporarily insane. If you succeed on an intellect check, but it doesn't matter, it didn't happen. So, temporary insanity is obviously where cool stuff happens. For me. But anyways, yeah, so that didn't happen. They lost some current sanity, but whatever. So now they're facing down this floating dagger. And so Ren immediately goes for the trash can lid, and he's got it. So he's got that, which helps his dodge rolls. Olaf is like backed into the corner. He's got his gun out, but he's not sure if he wants to shoot this, because I'm pretty sure he knows if he fails, it may hit Ren or Edward in the face, and I will laugh joyfully. And so he's backed into the corner. Edward cowers behind this little actress who's holding a trash can lid. And so, you know, chivalry and all that. So, you know, Ren's like this, Edward is behind him like this, and Olaf's in the corner, and if the dagger wasn't there, it basically would be Olaf just pointing his gun at the other two. Okay. And so we went into a combat round. And so, like I said, this dagger, he's deadly with this thing. And so he was rolling. He first was like lunging at Olaf, and then Ren tried to get in to try and grab it. And yeah, trying to grab a floating magical killer dagger with your bare hand. Yeah, it didn't quite go well for him. It didn't kill him or anything, but he couldn't quite get his hands on it. And then Edward wasn't sure if he should just run out or if he should try and help. He had a real conflicting moment. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be a coward or he wanted to be the hero. He tried to be the hero. So he's like, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to lunge for it. He misses. And I'm like, all right, well, the dagger is going to lunge at you. So I rolled for the attack. I got an extreme success. I rolled like a 7 or something. He failed his roll. He would have had to roll like a 10 or less to not get hit. So I got the extreme success on him. And extreme success with weapons means painful. The damage was 6 plus 2 plus 1d4. And I rolled a 4. Believe me, I did. So, yeah, that's 12 damage. You know how much health Edward had? 12. Or 10. I think it might have been 10. So, yeah. The dagger just sunk into his neck, and just blood was spurting out, and his body just collapsed to the floor, and it was just twitching as he finally just spasmed into death. And I'm like, okay, Olaf, your turn. Yeah, that's how Call of Cthulhu is. And this dagger wasn't even the most deadly thing in here. You know, once they actually fight Walter Corbett, holy shit, you know. And so, at this point, I sent another whisper to Olaf, and I'm like, you hear a yell in your head. It says, shoot the other one, and I will spare you. And so we get to Olaf's turn, and he's like, I'm like, yes, yes. And so I'm like, okay, the dagger turns in midair and points towards Ren. And so Ren, this little wealthy local theater actress, is holding a garbage can lid, staring down a gun and a floating dagger. And he's just like, fuck this. And he starts running up the stairs. And so I think it went to Olaf's turn next. Olaf did not shoot. And so then it went back to the dagger's turn, and he was like, alright, well, he doesn't care then, so I attacked Olaf. And so Olaf and the dagger had this epic struggle where Olaf kept trying to grab at every turn, but failing, because he didn't put any points into Brawl. So he had to roll like a 25 or lower, and even the times that he did succeed, you know, Walter Corbett, again, with his 90, could roll an extreme success much easier, or a hard success, whatever. So Olaf could just not get a handle on this thing, and so eventually just, over time, it stabbed him into death. I think it took 3 strikes. Finally, he got like an extreme success. When Olaf was at 1 HP, I did like 11 damage, and like, yeah, you're dead. So, right after that happened, Ren was booking it out of the house to his car. And I'm like, okay, he's just going to drive away. All right. No, he wasn't going to drive away. He got a can of gasoline out of the trunk of his car, took it into the house, threw it all over the hallway, and lit the match. And I'm like, Call of Cthulhu, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that doesn't kill Walter Corbett. So, whoever goes down there to investigate is just going to be killed by the dagger again. And so I guess eventually they're going to have to send some real force down there to deal with whatever it is, but yeah, I thought that was funny. God. So, yeah. Okay, so what they missed out on was the upstairs. And with my whole thing at the start when they went into the house was to get them upstairs to the spare bedroom. Because Walter Corbett, that used to be Walter Corbett's room, so he has a lot of magical strength in that room. So if they go up there and they're led to like the window because it's like rattling or something, and they're like looking out the window, the bed frame that's sitting there, Walter will throw the bed frame at them as hard as he can and smash them through the window to the concrete below. And this does like 2d6 damage or some shit like that. At least. I would probably up that, personally. I think that would hurt. And so that's designed to pretty much incapacitate somebody. And so then, if they actually get into Walter Corbett's little secret chamber, they have to like bust through a wall to get there. If they get in there, they have to fight him. And even before they can fight him, he has the Dominate spell, and he's likely to succeed with the Dominate spell. And so for like 1d6 plus 1 rounds, he can control somebody's actions. Which I think is really cheese. Because as soon as they walk into the house, I could just dominate the guy with the gun and just be... It says no suicidal action, so I guess he couldn't do that. But he could, like, shoot themselves in the leg or something. I don't know. So, I didn't use the Dominate spell, but I would have if they would have started getting close to where he was, you know, resting. He definitely would have used it. Probably on Olaf. He seemed vulnerable. And there were rats in the walls that would have attacked them. And when they're fighting Corbett, he's got like 16 health, and then he has the Flesh Ward spell, which gives him like 2d6 armor So they have to break through that first. So he could conceivably have like 28 health. If they stab him with the dagger, he dies instantly no matter what. So that's cool. But if they don't stab him with the dagger, which they have to really like wrest a hold of, he's going to try to be yanking it out of their hands. If they can't get a hold of it, and they're just like shooting at him, yeah, it's not great for them. It would have been a tough fight. But the dagger got them. But the actress survived. She got out. Okay? And so she may return in the next adventure. We'll see. Yeah, but holy shit. I was having so much fun with that. Yeah, like I said, this game is really up my alley. So, I think the others agreed. It was pretty damn fun. And this is just the basic starting scenario. The next one we're going to do is a bit more involved. I think it'll be a bit cooler. And then I'm hoping at some point, maybe over the summer, to do like a full campaign. One of the more well-known ones that people like to run. And that should be very interesting. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I think that was a fun story to be able to tell. I think most people that play this, I think anybody that plays Call of Cthulhu is going to come out with some funny stories. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. But next week we'll be back to Shadowrun for more criminal hijinks. So futuristic criminal hijinks. So completely different. Alright, so my name is Mang. This has been Roll Mangging for Call of Cthulhu. And I'll see you fine folks next week.